Coming up on this episode of Good Teams Win, Great Teams Cover.
I don't see how, as a Giants fan, you can't be excited about having John Harbaugh. You're looking at a head coach there who is going to be probably the best and most experienced head coach that the Giants have had since they got rid of Tom Coughlin back in...
Welcome back and thanks for joining us. Good Teams Win, Great Teams Cover. We're on to our 4th division preview episode. It's the NFC East to round out the NFC. We'll be previewing the Dallas Cowboys, the New York Giants, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Washington Commanders. Byron, you're looking great. Your Cowboys cap ready to preview our own division?
Absolutely, yeah. I had to get appropriate headwear for the occasion. Might swap it out for our guest spot as it's not a Cowboys fan. I don't want to be antagonistic. But yeah, really excited. Exciting division, I think. A lot of changes at all 4 teams, whether it's players or coaches or both. So yeah, interested to see how we think all 4 teams will do.
Excellent. Well, let's just get into it. We've got the guest joining us first. We've got Craig Rigden joining us from the Irish NFL show. Big New York Giants fan, so he's going to preview a very exciting New York Giants team with a lot of change going on in NYC. So let's see what Craig thinks of the New York Giants, and then we'll be back to preview the Cowboys, the Eagles, and the Commanders, and share our best bets to finish off the show.
Joining us for our first team is the New York Giants. We've got Craig Rigden of the Irish NFL show. Craig, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, mate. Yeah, looking forward to this. Normally, I cover a little bit of everything, so it's nice to get back to the hometown team and start talking about Giants.
Yeah, and we normally try and decide like who's the most interesting team in the division. I think in kind of a landslide this year is the 2026 Giants. Not necessarily saying going to be the best team in the division. You know, we shall see, obviously, but a lot has gone on, and you know, for a team who I think are normally relatively stable, the Giants, I think it's a very interesting, set of changes have gone through. So we'll dive right into the headlines. We won't dive right into the headlines. First, we'll look at 2025. So my apologies. 4-13 record, 4th in the division. Missed the playoffs, obviously, finished 4th in the division. Pretty good chance. 3rd year in a row. Points per game. Offense 17th, defense 26th. And it always surprised me. You look at the talent on that defense, and I always think the defense is going to be like pretty good. And yeah, 26th doesn't seem to align with what that talent has. How did you feel about the 2025 season? Obviously, Daboll let go midway through it. Mike Kafka, I believe, finished the season. How did you think about the season as a whole?
It wasn't ideal. I think we all had higher expectations coming in. You bring in Jackson Dart, which I think a lot of people thought was going to start at some point. But obviously we had Russell Wilson. We also had Jameis Winston. You know, as a quarterback room, when you look at that, you've got to think to yourself that's one of the stronger ones, despite the fact that obviously Russell was on a bit of a decline. Yeah. But it almost felt like it was set up perfectly for Wilson to run the season, have that one last shot at glory, train up Jackson Dart, and it just didn't work like that. You know, Wilson was hot and cold, mostly cold outside of a Dallas game that turned into a complete shootout very early. And then, you know, they pulled the trigger on Dart. And I think that was very much a case of Brian Daboll saw that he had one shot and one shot only to save his career as the Giants head coach. And he tried to do it and tried to inject it. And it just did not work. You know, it was week 4 that Jackson came in. He did well. But you just had to look at kind of not just the individual part, but how the team performed as a team. When you blow 5 double-digit leads, I think that speaks volumes as to how mismanaged the Giants were in 2025. Defensive coordinator just could not do anything at all. Defensively, we were absolutely shocking. When we lost against the Bears, that was kind of the final straw for Daboll. And I'm not sure if it was the losing streak that cost him his job, or if it was the fact that there were so many design runs that Mara and Tish turned around and went, hey, this is our new franchise quarterback. We're going to kill him before he even gets to the end of his first season here. Yeah. And we need to make a change before we get looked at as malpractice. So it wasn't great. You know, back in 2022, when we came off that winning season, our last winning season, John Mara turned around. It says it doesn't take long to go from Bono to Bozo. And I think they actually ended up keeping the Bozo around for a little bit too long. And the change should have been made. And then I think it was vindicated last year. Dart's rookie numbers were fantastic, though. 14 games, 12 starts, 15 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. He had 9 rushing touchdowns, which was a franchise record. I think he had the 3rd most by by any rookie in NFL history, behind Cam Newton's 14. His statistically, he was up there.
Yeah.
He just wasn't on the field enough for when we needed him. And obviously the big kicker for him, and the reason that we almost had to put everything on his back, was Malik Neighbours obviously tearing his ACL early in the season, week 4. So,
yeah, that was, again, someone not a Giants fan, but I love Malik Neighbours as a player. That was really upsetting. Have a lot of Malik Neighbours in fantasy last year as well, because he's so good. And it was a huge loss. Wan'Dale Robinson, sneaky, incredible season out of all of that dust. But yeah, I was really encouraged by Jackson Dart as well, where we done a 2025 redraft recently. And I don't know if I had the first pick, but I certainly took Jackson Dart with my first pick, which was the team I was picking for. I would take him as a quarterback 1 in that class right now. I know Cam Ward was drafted a lot earlier, but like you look at like the EPA per dropback numbers, even not just the rushing stuff, and he was shone compared to any of the other rookie quarterbacks in that class. Tyler Shook had an okay end as well, but yeah, compared to Shadur and Cam Ward, that was levels above them both. So, and it's not like, you hear a lot of Cam Ward about he doesn't have the weapons. Well, we just mentioned who, Dart was thrown to. It was Wan'Dale Robinson, Theo Johnson, and,
Darius Slayton, who dropped more than he caught. So,
yeah, it's a wild bunch of names. But speaking of the day ball, speaking of the replacement, we will jump into headline 1 here. New head coach, Giants hire more. They're not always going to work. Following Brian Daboll's mid-season dismissal, Giants move on to Ravens legend John Harbaugh. Long time in Baltimore, won a Super Bowl, obviously. Ended up being fired at the end of his last season in Baltimore. A surprise to some, certainly. How are you feeling about getting John Harbaugh in the building, though? Much more of a CEO type than, Brian Daboll, who's much more focused on the offense. But yeah, how are you feeling about Harbaugh going into year 1?
I don't see how, as a Giants fan, you can't be excited about having John Harbaugh. You're looking at a head coach there who is going to be probably the best and most experienced head coach that the Giants have had since they got rid of Tom Coughlin back in, what was it, 2019 time? I think it was. So, they went down the route of going for rookie head coaches for a while there. They went back to back on it, and it just didn't really work out. The Giants have had a pretty abysmal run there, but you look at what Harbaugh's bringing in. During his time in Baltimore, so 13 seasons, 12 playoff appearances, obviously got the Super Bowl ring there, didn't finish below 500, which is one thing that obviously the Giants have not had winning seasons recently, and to have some stability in the building is going to be key. But you are looking at a coach there who does have a few wrinkles. Obviously, there's the sort of narrative around the Baltimore Ravens not being able to close out games, something that the Giants obviously struggled with last year, probably to a much harsher degree than what the Ravens did. But he is a Super Bowl winning coach. He's a coach who's going to come in. He's going to demand a respect. He's going to demand discipline as well, which is something that really fell wayside last year after you heard that Brian Daboll was allowing Abdul Carter to miss meetings, sleep in meetings, get away with stuff. And a lot of the other players obviously couldn't drive the locker room from within because of the fact that Daboll was really sort of undermining them in a way and not being that head coach that he should have been. So what Harbaugh's going to bring in is that level of respect that I don't think, like I said, we've had since Tom Coughlin. I think you look at his identity as well. He demands a physical game. He builds from the trenches on both sides. We've kind of seen that with the offensive line and what they've tried to do. Defensive line, obviously there's a bit of a gaping hole, but I know we're going to touch on that a little bit later, so I'll save that. But he is a run first. He is a tight end heavy kind of guy. This is probably going to be a little smash-mouthy football that we're going to see from the Giants this year. And because we haven't done it for a while, I'm not really sure what really to expect. But I do think he has been very, very adamant about how much he's looking forward to working with Jackson Dart. And I think that means that you're going to see a mentality change from Dart to make sure that he is available. We've come off the back of having Eli Manning, where his best ability was availability. He didn't miss games. He was an absolute monster at being out on the field, regardless of whether he was injured or not. And we'd like to see that from Jackson Dart. There's obviously been a little bit of banter between the two quarterbacks as well around rings, and they did a joint signature recently on a card, and And Dart said that Eli needed to get a chain, and Eli said, "I tell you what, trade in your chain for a ring, and we'll talk." and I think that's the mentality that you need to have. You know, Eli was cold. That's just what he was on a football field, but he was very playful off of it. Yeah. And that's almost what we need with Jackson Dart, because there's off-field stuff with Dart that hasn't gone great so far with the President Trump stuff, and obviously that didn't go down well in the building with everyone. And sometimes. You know, I speak about this, and a couple of the guys from the Irish NFL show who are also Giants fans have spoken about how, you know, Dart hasn't actually really done anything in the NFL. So maybe you just need to rein it back in, prove something, and then you can go and do your extracurricular stuff and not really do it now. But yeah, Harbaugh cannot wait to see what he brings to this team.
Cool. One of the things he will bring in with him, or has brought with him already, is a new head coach. Former Bears head coach, new OC, Matt Nagy. Can Nagy make the offense automatic? Comes in as the OC following his spell in Kansas City. Is Nagy the man to make that a bullseye hit? Obviously, mixed in Chicago, but he did have a winning record overall. I know they lost the playoff game because of a double doink. You know, let's not kill the guy for not making the best Super Bowl contenders. Plenty haven't before. How are you feeling about Matt Nagy as OC?
I'm okay with it. I was actually in San Fran when this news dropped, and it was a little bit of a surprise, I think, to all of us Giants fans about how that was going to work. You look at what he was doing in Kansas City; they didn't have a great year, but then again, he's not the offensive coordinator who's calling plays in Kansas City. He's just the offensive coordinator, and I think you look at what he did at the Bears. He probably took on too much there. He started very well. Let's not go, take anything away. He did do very well in his first season. It just seemed to tail off after that. I think what you're looking at with Matt Nagy is really the experience that he brings to the team, but also he is very good at kind of molding quarterbacks in a way that maybe he's unappreciated for. I think he needs to develop Dart's deep ball. He needs to build a structured system for him that doesn't lead him to kind of run all over the place and kind of play what I would call hero ball. But also, I think what he needs to do is he just needs to make sure that the offense is inspiring. It's something that I've noticed from the Giants across the time when Mike Kafka was play caller, and obviously Brian Dable took it, and then it went back to Kafka, and it kind of yo-yoed between the two of them. But neither of them really felt inspiring to me. Like everything felt very vanilla, and I'd like to see us start to bring in a few trick plays. Like it started to happen towards the end of last season. You look at the Jameis Winston touchdown, which is probably still one of the best ones of last season, weirdly. But I'd like to see a little bit more of that. You look at how creative some other teams are and how they use quarterbacks that are dual threat like Jackson Dart is, and that's what Matt Nagy needs to do. He needs to really move forward with that and create an offense where you don't know what's going to happen, because there are too many times where the Giants go inside run 1 yard, inside run -1 yard, and then Dart's looking at like third and long, and you're just never going to use an offense well when you're looking at that, and it just happening consistently through the game to the point where you go, well, this is just us now. Yeah.
Well, hopefully, as long as we don't get a third and 10, Joe Judge doing the quarterback sneak with Danny Dimes. As long as we never go back to that, I think we'd be happy. But I do think it's worth mentioning, you mentioned about Matt Nagy in Chicago. Mitchell Trubisky, certainly that 2018 season, was the best Mitch we ever seen. I think he had like 500 rushing yards, a handful of rushing touchdowns. We seen it last year with Mahomes. I know he's not calling plays, but that Kansas City offense, especially once Rashee Rice was down, was very talent deficient. And they got Mahomes moving then. I think he had about 500 rushing yards. It was career high. At least 5 rushing touchdowns. It was one of my favorite bets most weeks was Mahomes have a rushing touchdown like 5-1, and he kept hitting it, especially early in the season. And I think he has shown that ability with a mobile quarterback to get them on the move, whether that's opening up a passing lane or just scrambling for yardage. If we could teach Jackson Dart to, get himself down, avoid contact, I think there's a lot of opportunity there for that to be a match made in heaven. Hopefully, Mitch Trubisky. If Mitch Trubisky can do it, I'm very sure Jackson Dart can do it, because I think Jackson Dart's been better in his career so far than Mitch showed at his best, truthfully. So fingers crossed for that one. We do have, you mentioned a gaping hole in the defense. So on the line now, Dexter traded no law in New York. Mamdani might like me saying that, but defensive linchpin ends up in Cincinnati for the 10th overall pick. Is that enough for Sexy Dexy, or is there a sense of apoplexy?
It's difficult, this one, because I see the benefits of it. I also don't like letting not only your best player walk, but one of the best players in the NFL. Let's not, before I get into like how the trade happened and what I think about his legacy in New York and everything, let's just take a step back and go. Dexter Lawrence is the best nose tackle in the NFL. He does not get the plaudits because he was on a team that didn't do very well. And that's always going to happen. This man should have been a first-team All-Pro for the last 3 seasons. I think he got it once, or maybe even just the second-team All-Pro.
Yeah.
He's had a couple of down years. A lot of that has been down to injury, and it's also been down to maybe just a little annoyance with how the Giants franchise was being run. But you actually look at his numbers outside of the sack numbers, and he was dominant, absolutely dominant. And then you compare it to other true nose tackles, because you've got to remember that a true nose tackle in the NFL is a dying breed. They are not used as that very often, especially not as a full-time role. You'll see defensive tackles line up at nose tackle, but they will kind of shift inside and outside. And no one plays pure nose tackle like Dexter Lawrence does. And he is a monster. Now, then you look at what we got. He was disgruntled. There was clearly an issue between him and Joe Shane. I think that was evident from the second that he handed in that trade request. You could tell that all the noise that was coming out was a Joe Shane issue. Even when people inside the building were talking about how John Harbaugh was trying to win him round, there was a point where Dexter Lawrence's agent turned around and said, "I don't want to talk to John Harbaugh." Like he almost banned him from talking, because it was to a point where he knew he was probably going to win him over.
Yeah. And
he didn't want that to happen because he'd seen what had happened there. He goes to the Bengals. It's a first-round pick. It's 10th overall, which is a pretty big haul. It only looks light because it's one pick. It's a top 10 pick. It is on the cusp, but it's still a top 10 pick. Mm-hmm. He then signs like that 1 year, $28 million extension, which is weird as hell. Like, if you're going to go somewhere, what
leverage?
Why? Yeah, it's just it was less than I think the Giants were offering him to play that year. So I think that actually shows what his mentality was. But the Giants used that pick to pick up Arvell Reese, which potentially fills another gap that they had at linebacker. So there is still that gap there at defensive tackle. I'm just going to have a look at the depth chart, because I've got it here. I mean, DJ Reader is clued in to be that nose tackle. I think that's a very savvy pickup from the Lions.
Yeah.
And then the Giants also picked up Shelby Harris as well. So I do think that there are defensive tackle pieces there, but I think you could combine Shelby Harris and DJ Reader and probably still not get close to what a Dexter Lawrence is. So it's a very much a catch-22 situation. I think for all parties involved, it was the best thing that could have happened. It was the right thing to do. Dex can now go off to Cincinnati. Obviously, on the Irish NFL show, we cover all teams. Cincinnati had a need at defensive tackle more than anything. I mean, goddamn, that team was devoured of all talent, really. I mean, they picked up a couple in the offseason other than Dex this year, but last year they were horrific there. So, it's the right move for them. You just have to move on. I mean, the NFL is the NFL, and you're always going to have a big churn of players. You don't want to see your best players leave, but you understand why it happens.
Absolutely. And it is a really tough balancing act, because I think, we're talking Giants here, but looking at the Bengals angle, it does feel like there's a little bit of Joe Burrow unhappiness as well lingering. And you need to be win now if you want to keep Joe Burrow around. You want to keep him happy and smiling. So I think on that sense, it makes sense, rather than adding, whomever it might be, whether it's a best defensive player, best tackle, whatever it might be. Do they give you more chance in 2026 to win? Probably not. But in 2027, 2028, maybe. But I think you're absolutely right. It's a win-win-win for everybody. The Bengals win, Giants win, and Sexy Dexy wins, because again, he's not somebody who's ever been like a malcontent or disgruntled, I don't think, on the field especially. So for him to put a trade request in, it did feel like, okay, something's probably going to get done here, because he's not just you never hear about Dexter Lawrence. You see him on the field and you never hear him, the chances of him ending up like Brandon Ayuk, I'd say, are very, 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 very small, because it's super professional. And I think just everybody wins is really the ultimate way to look at it. And again, if you kind of position it as DJ Reader plus the 10th overall pick, it sounds better as well, because DJ Reader is not Dexter Lawrence. but he can fill that gap.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Some
exactly.
of it, at least.
Yeah.
And we have had a busy off-season on the offensive side of the ball as well. Skill position set, a likely story. John brings Isaiah Likely from Baltimore, and former Giants standout OBJ returns, rounding out a collection of veteran free agents in the wide receiver room. I'll just run through them here. I've got the depth chart up. So we've got Calvin Austin in the slot, Juju Smith-Schuster, Darnell Mooney, Braxton Berrios, and then OBJ, who on his first few years in the NFL was going to the Hall of Fame. One of my all-time favorite talents, truthfully, even though I'm a Cowboys fan. Mm-hmm. Loved OBJ. He's not OBJ that we once knew. He's had a year out. We don't know how he's going to come back. Hopefully, great. I would love to see it for all kinds of reasons. So yeah, looking at the wide receivers, as well as OBJ, we've got Calvin Austin, Juju Smith-Schuster, Darnell Mooney, Braxton Berrios, and OBJ. But the headline piece, I think, is Isaiah Likely. Comes in top 5 tight end money. John Harbaugh obviously knows him really well. Backed up Mark Andrews for years. Shone on a per snap basis, but never got the full workload you would want because he's backing up Mark Andrews, who's at the time one of the top 2 or 3 tight ends in the league. How are you feeling about this group of pass catchers?
Do you know what? I'm actually really okay with it. It was weird going through free agency, knowing that we had Malik there, knowing that Wan'Dale was likely to go elsewhere for more money than we were going to pay him. And fair play to the kid, go and get your money. We kind of force-fed the ball to you for 2 years and probably took a little bit of tread off those tires, but go and get paid. NFL, not for long. Go and do what you need to do. Darius Slayton was on a slightly longer contract, but outside of that, there wasn't a lot. I'll start with Isaiah Likely just because of the fact that obviously he is the headline of that free agency class. It made perfect sense. And I think you saw that with a lot of other ones like Patrick Ricard, the fullback. Yeah. Both of those are just John Harbaugh kind of signings and they made sense. Now, for the Ravens, I can't believe they let Isaiah Likely go, knowing the age and the decline that Mark Andrews has been on recently. But that's their loss is the Giants' gain. Yeah. He averages about 14.7 yards per reception in 2024. Which was second amongst all qualified tight ends. I mean, Harbaugh offenses are tight end heavy. Yeah. The Giants have Chris Manhurst, who is a phenomenal blocking tight end. He is not a pass catcher. I think the touchdown that he had with the Giants last year or the year before was his first ever catching touchdown. He's 34 years old. I mean, come on, that shows you what he does. Theo Johnson is raw. He's actually been, in my opinion, a little bit of a disappointment. I thought he would completely fly away in the NFL, and I thought he would bring to the Giants what he had at Penn State, and he just hasn't quite got there. He does make the good catches, but he cannot seem to catch the catchable stuff. And, consistency is what we need. So big fan of the Isaiah Likely one. Really, really happy with that. Obviously, we've got a couple of players who are coming back from injury. You've got Malik Neighbors. I've already mentioned that, the torn ACL, partially torn meniscus as well. I think we don't see Malik Neighbors until October. I know John Harbaugh's he's going to do stuff during training camp. Yeah, but how much is he going to be doing? Is that your way of saying, he's going to have an iPad and he's going to be going through the playbook? Or is that your way of saying Malik Neighbors is going to run, 60-yard routes during training camp? Like that, there's no in between there. It does feel like Malik Neighbors is going to take a while. And I think that's why you've seen such a heavy load on players that have experience. I think what the Giants have done is that they've taken what I call swing for the fences players. You look at Calvin Austin, who has never been phenomenal, but he's been steady enough that I think you could take a swing on him. And if you're getting the good Calvin Austin, you're getting a heck of a player. And I think the same can be said for Darnell Mooney. You're looking at Darnell Mooney, who actually did quite well at Chicago, and then just kind of the last season was a little bit of an anomaly, but didn't really work for him. But those two are really interesting. Braxton Berrios, I'm not too sure about whether that's a camp body or a bit more. Juju Smith-Schuster in the same kind of vein. I think there's definitely still a player in there. You don't stick around at Kansas City as long as Juju did and not be a good player. And then you get to OBJ. Now, OBJ is really, really tough to kind of get your head around because you're not getting the Odell Beckham that made the catch against the Cowboys in his rookie year. You're not getting the Odell Beckham that was making diving end zone catches against the Commanders every time we played them. You're not getting an Odell Beckham where you're throwing a slant and he's going to take it 68 yards, make 3 people miss and get the touchdown. Like, he's a very different player now. He, like you said, he's been out of the game for a year. We've seen the injury issues the last few times. He had a bit part kind of role at the Dolphins, didn't really work. You saw what happened in the Super Bowl with the Rams where he tore his ACL again. Like, it hasn't worked. And I think what I'm really looking for with OBJ is somebody who can come in, be a surefire, safe catch. Like, he can still do it. We've seen it. Yeah. He can still do it. He's a little slower, but he's still savvy. And I think what they've actually brought Odell in for is maybe just to kind of mold Neighbors. There was a very similar trajectory with what Neighbors did in his first year versus Beckham. And I think what they need to do is they need to get Beckham in there, go to Neighbors. Hey, look, kid, I was you. A bit of arrogance, the flamboyancy, the ability, which I think they both have. And it's just a good way for him to be able to mold Neighbors and say, hey, look, this is where it kind of went wrong for me and my trajectory changed. And this is how you can control your own destiny to make sure that it doesn't go the same way. And that's the really interesting thing for me. Do I think he'll make the roster? He's got a chance. I don't think Harbaugh's handing out, flowers and victory laps. I think that he's handing out contracts that are going to go to players who are going to make a contribution. And I think if Odell proves himself that he can do that, then there's no reason that he can't be that bit part player, but he needs to make sure that he is happy with that role of a mentor more than a game changer.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Yeah. And talk about being reliable. I don't know if I've ever seen I don't know if I'm being hyperbolic again. I love OBJ. I'm not sure if there's a player with a better pair of hands I've ever seen in the league. If you just want someone who can, make a 10-yard and then dig route and get you that first down, OBJ would be high on my list of players that I just assume is super strong hands, will just catch the ball and get down.
Yeah.
And if he can teach, Malik Neighbors some, life lessons along with football lessons, all the better for it. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like Malik Neighbors has done anything wrong. He seems like a great kid. But anything he can do to help that along, Malik Neighbors is, in my opinion, the future of this franchise on offense. I think is one of the future NFL wide receivers that, we'll talk about with Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. He's that next crop, and I think he's right at the top of it, truthfully. As much as it might pain me as a Cowboys fan, he just is. He's impeccable. So hopefully he comes back when he's ready as well, because I don't think, we'll get to the over-under and we'll get to see Super Bowl odds, etc. I don't think the Giants will win or bust this year. To me, bring him back when he's ready. If that's October, great. If it's September, great. But just don't rush him. There's no need for it. He's, like I said, to me, the future of the franchise. Do not rush him back. Look at the rest of the free agents here who came in. I'm not sure if there's anybody else we need to touch on. Mentioned Patrick Riccardo. I thought was an interesting one already. Okereke left town. Flott left town. We touched on Dex Lawrence. Any other free agent acquisitions that we didn't mention or departures?
I think we've got most of them there. I think a very interesting one is Greg Newsome, cornerback that came in from was he at the Browns?
Giants.
I think he was at the Jags and went to the Browns, and now he's obviously with the Giants. Outside cornerback has been a real contentious position for the Giants. Paulson Adebo obviously is being paid quite a lot of money, and he didn't perform to how we would hope. Deonte Banks, I would rather not have to get into, just because of the fact that I think we've all been burnt as Giant fans as to what happens with Deonte Banks. And the truth be told, the only way that he gets a roster spot is one, accepting a backup position, and two, probably as a kick returner, because actually he was quite good at that. But you don't want to have a first round kick returner. That's not usually what you do. Greg Newsome, I saw him lock down Justin Jefferson, I think it was, in London, and thought, wow, he's going to turn it round at the Browns. And then he was very inconsistent. But, new pastures bring new ideas and new schemes, and I think he could be quite a good little fit there. I'm just having a look through. I mean, we've spoken about Isaiah Likely, we've spoken about the wide receivers. I actually think that the best addition that the Giants made in free agency was a player who was already on the Giants in 2025, and that is Jermaine Illuminor.
Oh, yeah.
I genuinely, after the offensive line play that the Giants have seen over the years, it has been an issue pretty much since their last Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And since then, Eli Manning failed to get a good offensive line for the tail end of his career. We haven't been able to do anything since. We've got probably one of the best left tackles in the game in Andrew Thomas, and then just everything else seems to fall apart. They make the pick at number 10. They make the pick at number 10 for Maui Noa. I think that CC is going to be a phenomenal input there at right guard. He obviously has the tackle experience as well, so in the future he could always move out there if necessary. He's 6'6", 329. Like, he's exactly what you want to do to just put in that guard spot and nobody's getting around him. I genuinely think he will be that week one starter at right guard. Daniel Falele obviously was brought in, another one of those kind of Harbaugh-esque players, but he's going to be the backup for sure. Then you look at Jermaine. Jermaine's going to be that right tackle, and he was phenomenal. Now, I've been lucky enough. I've been in the locker room at MetLife Stadium and spoken to Jermaine Illuminor. Jermaine is British, British born. He comes from London. I got a chance to speak to Jermaine when he was filling in for Andrew Thomas at left tackle, because Andrew was injured at the time, and we kind of had a little joke between us because I've spoken to Justin Pugh a couple of times, and Justin Pugh was talking about left tackle, right tackle, and saying it's very difficult to go from right tackle to left tackle because it's like wiping your ass with the other hand. And that was something that Jermaine kind of agreed with. It is very difficult. Obviously, he was able to do it really well. I think the versatility that he gives us with the fact that Andrew Thomas is maybe questionable for week one, coming back off of his injury, is phenomenal. That can't be understated. That was the most important free agent acquisition, was a free agent that was already in the building.
Yeah, certainly. And it has been a sore point, but if the Giants are going to run like smash mouth kind of football, like say having Mawanoa at right guard, along with two really good tackles, let's be fair, it's a great starting point, certainly. And that does take us on to the draft class. I will ask if Illuminor done a visual demonstration of that simile there, of the difference between right and left tackle. I'm going to presume he
did not. He did not, thank God. He did not. But it's one of my favourite quotes.
It's fantastic. I love it. Giants, though, had 2 top 10 picks. Arvell Reese, we mentioned. Mawanoa, we mentioned. And then they also had 2 more top 100 picks. So that did Colton Hood. I thought it was Colston for a second. I had to double check myself. Colton Hood and Malachi Fields, wide receiver and cornerback there in opposite order. Who of these stand out? Arvell Reese, I can't believe, went to 5. I can't believe a running back went ahead of him. Blew my mind on draft night. It's still blowing my mind now. The Cardinals... It's not a Cardinals show. I don't understand. You must have been pleased to get Arvell Reese at 5, though.
Yeah, so we did a live draft show, the Irish NFL show that I was on. So we're watching it live. I think the initial reaction to Arvell Reese was shock, and I think it was the same actually at number 10 with Maui Noa, because of the fact that there were 2 positions that I just didn't think the Giants were going to address that early. Obviously, everyone projected Arvell Reese as being an edge rusher. The Giants have been very adamant that he is not going to be an edge rusher. He will be a linebacker with the ability to rush off the edge if necessary. You look at that room with Brian Burns, obviously Abdel Carter, and we've still got Kayvon Thibodeau as well. Yeah. So it's scary what the potential is, but I think it is the right move to move him to linebacker next to a free agent person we probably didn't talk about in Tremaine Edmonds as well. So I think those 2 are going to work very well together. I think the initial shock was because of how it was going to work, but you kind of believe in Harbaugh and what's going to happen. The same with Maui Noa. I think everyone was projecting him as a tackle, so you pick him up and you think, well, we've got Andrew Thomas, we've just paid Jermaine Illuminor, what happens? And then they say, oh, we're going to put McGard, and you're like, oh, it makes sense. Yeah. John Harbaugh builds from the trenches. If you look at Colton Hood, though, I think Colton Hood is a first-round talent who dropped out of the first round because there was an abundance of talent in this year's draft. And there were a few reaches in that first round from certain teams that I think allowed some of the better players to drop down. The Giants obviously benefiting from the fact that they had a higher draft pick in all the rounds because of what happened last year. But Colton Hood, 1 touchdown allowed in 700 coverage snaps. He will, I would say, probably start behind Greg Newsome on the outside. But whatever happens in training camp, that you could see him progress. Malachi Fields is a slightly weird one because I don't think any of us were enamored with the trade up, because you're giving away draft capital that we didn't really have, because we didn't have that third rounder because of the trade up to get Jackson Dart the year before. So I think a lot of us were a little confused. We needed that big-bodied X receiver. We don't have really one of those outside of the tight end position. Obviously, Malik Neighbors is gone, and you're going from essentially a very small-bodied, low catch radius guy to a big guy with big catch radius. He will be, I would say, probably wide receiver 3, if not the backup to wide receiver 2 to start the season. But I'm quite looking forward to Malachi Fields. I think he did amazingly well at Notre Dame, and is going to come in and contribute. We need it at that position because it is a wide open battle, I think. Yeah,
he really stands out. I think he's 6'5", huge character. So we'll certainly see. I mean, you automatically just think, like, even just in the red zone, if he's not even the target, just you've got to cover him because he's 6'5". You know, you have to pay attention to him. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. And yeah, I absolutely love what they did. I mean, you have 2 top 10 picks. You expect them to both be hits, but I think they're both really. They're not just good players, but they seem like really professional players as well who, you know, you never heard a bad word about either of them throughout the process. And I think you look at John Harbaugh, yeah, he built through the trenches, but he also always has a highly paid, high-level linebacker, whether that's Roquan Smith, Ray Lewis, CJ Mosley. It's always like a focal point of his defense is having that captain on the field. And the fact Reese is going to play more linebacker than edge rusher, again, it enables you to keep Thibodeau and keep him happy, keep Abdul Carter, keep Brian Burns, all those guys, you know, have kind of like that motor rotation. Doesn't bode well for teams who, if you've got 1 weak offensive lineman, good luck, because they're going to come from somewhere, and if you've got 4 of them, you don't know which one's coming for you.
No.
Not great.
I think there was a little bit of trepidation from Giants fans just because of the fact that there is a lot of similarities between what happened last time the Giants had 2 first-round picks, both in the top 10, where they took Kayvon Thibodeau, who obviously played edge rusher, hasn't exactly set the world on fire, and then Evan Neal, which I think it's safe to say is a complete and utter bust, who was an offensive tackle. So you're then taking a linebacker who was projected as an edge rusher, you're taking an offensive tackle. I think the PTSD was kind of full flowing on draft night. But I think now that the dust has settled, I think we can understand where it's going. And obviously, you look at the back end of the draft as well, where you've got Bobby Jemison Travis, you've got Davis there as well, and then Kelly. You're looking at players there who are going to fill trenches, and that's like I said, the John Harbaugh way.
Yeah, it's perfect John Harbaugh to finish that off. You're absolutely right. And we're going to look ahead actually into the season now. We have got the over-unders here. So Giants over-under is 7.5 wins. And the bookies don't know what to do with that because they have the over at odds on at 20-21. They have the under at odds on as well at 20-23. They love to have their cake and eat it. Make the playoffs 27-10 to make the playoffs, not to make 1-4. What stands out to you here? Would you over or under 7.5?
I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. John Harbaugh has not finished below 500 in the time he was at Baltimore. And I can't imagine that it's something that he's going to look at now. I think if you look at the second half of the year for Dart, he played phenomenally well. The pass rush group we've spoken about could be elite. The NFC East has question marks. Philadelphia has a new OC, and they've really struggled sometimes offensively. They don't have A.J. Brown. Dallas worry me. I will admit they do. I think their rebuilt defense is something that's been on the cards for so many years, and they finally did it. And now that's going to be interesting. Jaden Daniels comes back, but he's been injury prone. You never know what to expect with the Commanders. So I actually think it's relatively wide open. And when you look at what divisional games bring, they're not one of those ones where you can look on paper and you can go, well, that team finished 4th last year. It's going to be an easy win, because they just blow everything out of the water. You just have to look across at some of the other divisions in the NFC, like the North, where anything can happen between those 4 teams. I feel like it's the same across the board, because expectations and rivalries are just very different.
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem that the Giants are going to have is week 1 and week 2. You're opening up Sunday Night Football against Dallas. You then go to week 2, Monday Night Football against the Rams, who are obviously coming back from Australia. So you don't know how they're going to fare with that kind of travel. It's never been done before. It's the first game over in Australia. So that could be difficult. I think an 0-2 start with this kind of coaching staff could be a little concerning, but I do think that John Harbaugh's the kind of coach who will turn around and say, look, it's a brutal start. You just wipe the slate clean. We start at 0-0 and we go from there. I think it's all going to come down to availability of players. Andrew Thomas, Cam Scatterby, is he going to be, we haven't even spoken about Cam. Cam's coming back from that brutal ankle injury that was suffered against the Eagles. You look at Javon Holland, who was supposed to be that person at safety who was going to change everything. He was a little injury prone. We've spoken about Malik Neighbors. Who is Jackson Dart going to be thrown to? What's the chemistry like there early? It is difficult. I think 7 to 9 wins is a realistic look. I don't think we're looking at, the 4 that we've had the last 2 seasons. I think there will be progression there. I think it all just depends on whether Dart takes that year 2 leap and the availability of the players there, because it's horrible to say it, but kind of we almost live or die by the Dart kind of thing because outside of him we have Jameis Winston, who I think is one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league. But Jameis Winston's Jameis Winston. We love Jameis and we hate Jameis for what he is. He is, we call him ESPN 30-30 because of the fact that he had the 30 touchdowns and the 30 interceptions. Like, that's just what he is. So it is going to be really, really interesting. I don't think that it's a playoffs or bust season. It's definitely not a Super Bowl or bust season. I think it's what I would call a progressional season. You're looking for us to take that step forward with that new coaching staff to build for the future. We have a young team, a really young nucleus, a hungry team as well. And you can see that they want to fight for each other. But, you just kind of have to pump the brakes a little bit and kind of not drink the Kool-Aid too much, because otherwise you're going to build yourself up for false hope kind of thing.
Yeah, Rome wasn't built in a day, and nor is New York, I guess. So absolutely makes sense to me. I'm always glad when we have people who are realistic on the show. It makes life a lot easier than I think every team's going to win the Super Bowl. It's like, only one of them's going to, guys. Let me just tell you that. Our final slide is on that note. The Giants win the division 11-2, and then the conference 35-1, Super Bowl 70-1. I'm going to guess the latter two, no interest. I certainly have no interest in them. No offense, New York Giants. The division at 11-2, though, for, you say Philly have changes. Dallas have had big changes, but that doesn't mean they're all going to work very quickly. Certainly, we don't know. And Washington, goodness knows, they've had OC changes, DC changes, Jane Daniels, we don't know how many games he'll play, etc. 11-2 interest you at all as a bet you would make for the Giants to win the division?
Yeah, I think it probably would. And you're looking at a division in the NFC East that obviously very well yourself as well. But this is a division where there's no consistency over who wins this. I think, what is it? We've only had one repeat winner in the past 15 years or something stupid like that.
Longer,
exactly. So you're not looking at a division where it's one team who just wins it every single year after year, and away they go. You're looking at a division where anything happens. I think sometimes the rivalry between the teams in the NFC East is just higher than you see in a lot of other divisions, where it kind of feels a little wishy-washy. You look at what's happening in the NFC West between the Seahawks and the Niners and the Rams. That's a proper division where proper battles happen, proper hatred for each other. Some of the other divisions just don't feel in that kind of sense, especially on the AFC side. I think over the AFC side, it's a little bit more wishy-washy. I do like the division. I think the conference would be, fool's gold. I don't really think that there's any interest in that. Like we said, it's a progressional season, not anything like that. Could it happen? Of course it could happen. You just have to look at the Patriots last year. It could happen. But
the Seahawks were 60-1 to win the Super Bowl this time last year. You get the Seahawks at 60-1. So it certainly can happen. We've just seen it.
Exactly. So I think the division is definitely open for interpretation there. It's going to be a more positive season for the Giants. And, all it takes is for a couple of injuries and the Giants could win that division handily. Like that's all it takes. Sometimes you just hope you're not on the receiving end of them.
Absolutely, as the Giants seen last year with Andrew Thomas and Malik Neighbors. Well, that brings us to the end of the preview for the Giants. We're going to jump on, without you, Craig, to the rest of the NFC East. We've got the Cowboys, Eagles, Commanders to talk about. Thank you so much for joining us, Craig. Obviously, find you on the Irish NFL show. Find you on your personal Twitter, Twiglets88. Anything else you'd like to shout out before we let you go?
Just a shout out for my boys over in Big Blue UK and Ireland as well. So that's the Only Giants UK podcast that I was a part of previously before going to the Irish NFL show. Those guys still cover the Giants weekly, so give them a little shout out as well.
Wonderful, fantastic. We've had the Big Blue guys on before, and big fans of them as well, even though they are the Giants. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time, Craig. And go check out the Irish NFL show where you find more of Craig week to week.
Thanks to Craig Rigden there from the Irish NFL show, helping us preview the New York Giants. Make sure you go follow Craig and go follow the Irish NFL show as well. We've had Craig and Shane Brennan from the Irish NFL show on a few times as well. So friends of the show now for sure. Joe, Byron, let's get into the rest. I guess, shall we start with our Dallas Cowboys? Yeah, why not? Let's start with home. As the Cowboys finished 7-9-1. Second in the NFC East. Missed out in the playoffs for second year in a row. 7th scoring offense, according to Pro Football Reference, and worst scoring defense. 32nd, dead last, according to Pro Football Reference as well. Frustrating. I don't know, lots of words to describe the Cowboys 2025 season, but I would go just frustrating. How would you guys describe the Cowboys 2025 season?
Great for fantasy football, bad for real life football. Like, it was fun, but like not very good.
Joe was not quite a neutral. What would you make of? How did you make of the 5 season?
Yeah, it was a strange one, wasn't it? Obviously, you hit on some of the players you got in. Obviously, getting Pickens and. That's something worked out. That was a strange one, but they just kept losing some weird games. Obviously, the tie as well to the Packers just felt like it summed up the Cowboys season in week 4, that you managed to score a ton of points, but you also let a ton of points as well. And then just, defeats the Panthers. Now, we talked about the Cardinals last week in terms of the Cowboys just seeming to love to lose to the Cardinals, but that just summed up the Cowboys experience. There was still a little bit of hope when you got back to 6-5-1, beating the Chiefs at home, and then going 1-4 at the end. It was just a disappointing way to end their season. So I think, based on what Byron says, a frustrating one because it could have been a lot more with that offense being there. But yeah, it's just a very Cowboys kind of season in terms of missing the playoffs. And yeah, here we are again with, it looks like a great offense, and the defense just. Yeah, it is what it is.
But we'll get into that. I guess it's going to be part of our headlines. So let's get into our 4, I suppose, chaos season headlines for the Cowboys. I've not seen these yet at all. So, a drama-free summer. George Pickens gets franchised, tagged, and signs with no drama. Kicker Brandon Aubrey signs a record-setting extension. Yeah, we talked about, Joe, you mentioned kind of how good sort of the season Pickens had. Almost kind of maybe went too well for the Cowboys. Because they hadn't taken the step to sign him before last season, which they should have done if they were spending a goddamn 3rd-round pick on him. And then he exploded. He outperformed CeeDee Lamb as the Cowboys' number 1 wide receiver. And then that left him in a situation where they're going to have to pay him a shitload on an extension or kind of franchise tag him or look to trade him or whatever. Seems like he's going to be sticking around for at least 2026, and then maybe beyond, we'll see. But yeah, relatively quiet summer in terms of no real kind of dramas, no long drawn out contract sagas, or I don't think we've not. Too many major incidences. Fine, what have you made of kind of a relatively quiet summer for the Cowboys?
Yeah, it's been nice, yeah. I will say we're recording this, July, mid-July. Plenty of time to go. I'm sure someone can do something silly, or we'll find a contract dispute somewhere. It seems very unusual. maybe Jerry's going to fight the cheerleaders. I don't know, but I don't know. It's a little too quiet and a little too well organized at this point. Enjoy it while it lasts, I guess. So it feels good.
Yeah.
Can I ask as a non-Cowboys fan? Obviously, I've got a few questions, but obviously, it felt like you had to get George Pickens back when you look at the depth chart. I'm excited to see what Ryan Floney will do this year as being your third wide receiver. But you've got Turpin, MVS, Jonathan Mingo. So it felt like you had to bring Pickens back. There was some drama how much you should pay him. Are you going to trade him? Is it going to be similar to what happened last year? Obviously with Micah and everything around that. But did this feel like more Jerry didn't really have an option, because if you let Pickens go, it was like, what the hell are you going to have behind him? Even though you've got some young, Turpin can have a great game. I think Floney had a couple of games last year as well, but you really need that number two with, CeeDee Lamb can be great, but he's also got his injury history as well. So I was curious if it was like, if you didn't get Pickens, where would you be? And
yeah, as I said, I think the element of it went a bit too well. I thought I think the Cowboys, Jerry and Steve Jones, maybe thought they'd be in a better position this offseason in terms of, obviously, they're hoping Pickens did have a good year. I just think it went way beyond kind of any expectations for how good he'd be, because we also hadn't seen that level of performance with him at the Steelers. Like, he'd never done that before. So there's an element of that. But I think that number 3 wide receiver has been a problem for a little bit, because nobody's really taken the opportunity. Jalen Tolbert feels like maybe it was him for a bit and he just kind of didn't grab the opportunity. Turpin just feels very much very gimmicky. I think that might be the best way to describe him. He doesn't feel like a true kind of 3 receiver. So and kind of down the stretch, Ryan Floney did seem to just be making more and more plays, getting more and more targets from Dak Prescott, and seemed to feel a lot more comfortable with him. So it's him for now, and I think they do need a reliable number 3 option, and hopefully it will be Ryan Floney. So I don't think it's going to be any of the others that you mentioned. Awesome. Right, should we go to headline number 2? Jerry aggressive on D, aiming for glory hole. Following up 2025 moves, we've had in Rashawn Gary, Kobe Durant, Jalen Thompson, and D Winters. Yeah, very active in trades, I guess, defensively for the main part, and a couple, obviously, the free agent signing. Barry, how do you think they kind of round it? I feel like the floor of this defense is just so much higher than obviously where it was going into last season.
Yeah, obviously, you go back a year, you lose Micah Parsons, you're getting Quinnen Williams in that. And then in terms of veterans, I still don't think they should have traded for Sean Gary, because I think he was getting released. So that still irks me a little, but I'm going to get away from that. I think as a player is a good addition. D Witt is obviously useful in San Francisco. Jen Thompson, good safety, and Kobe Durant as well. So I think elevating the floor of that defense is so crucial. Like you've seen on the early slide, 32nd in scoring last year. It did feel like you could just kind of come in and do what you want against the Cowboys, especially in the passing game. So I didn't, obviously a little pass rush with Gary, but in the secondary especially, so important, because you no chance of making the playoffs if you are the worst defense in football. I don't think. Like, you've got to be really special to get that and have any success.
Yeah, I think there was like some key games, not key games, but games that were just really, really embarrassing for them when kind of looked at what some offenses did against the rest of the NFL versus what they did against the Cowboys. Like Russell Wilson rolled back the years on him early in the season in that kind of crazy Giants game. Yeah. JJ McCarthy arguably had his best passing game against the Cowboys, just diced them up. Justin Herbert, who'd been getting beat up for weeks because that Chargers O-line couldn't protect him, went untouched against the Cowboys and had, again, probably his best game of the season. And it was just real embarrassing at times. So it did need, he needs a lot. I still think he does need a lot of, it still does need more, but I think this is a really good start for them going to like somewhere in the middle ground. I would take that improvement in the Cowboys defense. If you just got somewhere in the middle of the pack for 2026, that would be a good start.
Yeah, I think their best defensive numerical performance was giving up only 16 points to the Geno Smith Raiders, which might have been their best offensive output all season. It probably wasn't, but like, that's terrible.
Yeah, and I'm curious, obviously, another year out with, Duran Bland coming, have another year to recover. I think he's massive if he can get to at least, maybe it might never get back to the level he was a few years back, but, just to be a competent, and you got like Kobe Durant in there to help out, because I think that was a bit of a shit show, along with the linebackers as well. It felt like that was just Cowboys' weakness. I know there'll be someone who will talk about who got released, who Byron always showed certain clips of his during games as well. So to try and improve that and just get some of the youngsters to improve, I like what they've done. It doesn't put me with a lot of confidence when you are getting people from Green Bay. It's not like Green Bay's defense has been, the standard in terms of what defenses should be able to do and what they should do. But at least they're trying to address it. We'll talk about the draft in a second. But yeah, you need them players to step up and be capable. If you're at the middle of the road, you give Dak and that offense a chance to actually win games and get a great and get a regular season of making the playoffs, because I think that's the way that they're going to have to go, where if the offense can do what the offense can do and the defense can just be middle of the road, then they should have a good season.
Excellent. Right, let's move on to headline number 3. Division crossover as Marvel Parker is now DC. Philly's pass preventer pivots to Cowboys corner champion. Could championship culture come along? That was difficult. I should have read these before, but excellent. Yeah, so Christian Parker is the new Cowboys defensive coordinator. A real exciting, viewed around the league as quite an exciting hire for the Cowboys. What differences are we expecting to see from kind of what Matt Eberflus's defense was versus kind of what Christian Parker kind of preaches and looks to deliver?
Well, I think his background is in defensive backfield, so I'm expecting improvement in the DB, certainly, along with the actual additions of them players. Don't know what kind of scheme he'll be running as yet. I haven't seen that discussed, but I know from speaking to Eagles fans that they're gutted that he's left. Obviously, it's promotion, so he's going to, but that kind of speaks to me that probably got a good one. He's really highly rated prior to becoming a DC, and he seems to be one of them who might not be a DC for long before he makes that next step up. So hopefully he's that good. Hopefully he can get these obviously veteran defensive players, and also, as we'll see, some rookies on defense as well who come pretty high reputation. So yeah, I think he's going to be somebody you can't be worse than Matt Eberflus's defense last year. They were 32nd out of 32. And it showed week to week. So, we automatically will expect better, but I think it could be a really good one. So I'm, for once, pretty optimistic about the Cowboys defense, certainly in the steps they might make. Maybe not this year, but like in the future.
Yeah, I think Chris Parker, his time even in Denver before he went to Philly, a big hand in Pat Surtain's development. And then, again, hugely influential in kind of how quick Quinny Mitchell and Cooper DeJean took to the NFL with the Eagles. So, yeah, I'm hoping he can have a real big impact on Siobhan Ravel, get maybe Bland back to a level and work with those guys. And when we start seeing a bit more production out of that secondary once again. But, yeah, just needs to tighten it up. But I think they've got the pieces to do so. Well, we'll get to kind of the draft in a moment, I guess, and talk about kind of what came from there as well. But I think exciting times for sure. All right, final Cowboy headlines. Conscious we could get stuck talking Cowboys for a bit. D is for defense and D is for draft. Caleb Downs headlines a heavy defensive draft class. Malachi Lawrence, another first rounder, with 5 total defensive players in the first 150 picks. Yeah, so the difference maker, I guess, could be Caleb Downs. We've kind of real excited and maybe a little bit shocked that on draft night the Cowboys were able to get in position to make a move to go get him and select the safety from Ohio State. I feel like calling him a safety might be a bit unfair, because I feel like he can be everywhere in that kind of secondary and just be kind of a real difference maker, a real, spark, and just somebody you can maybe build a defense around. Byron, I guess start with you, just because obviously it's our team. Yeah, how excited are you to see kind of Caleb Downs in that secondary for Dallas?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I haven't quite got a Saints City and Me video to excite everybody with, but no, I'm really pleased. I think in the build to the draft, we often discussed him as like one of the blue chip players in this draft class, and such a need for the Cowboys as well. It felt almost too good to be true, and then as the draft went along, here he comes. So no, I'm really excited about his potential. Again, year one, we'll see. You don't want to put too much pressure on a young player. See what kind of role he has. But yeah, overall, I'm really excited. I think he could be in time a top 5 safety in the league. So I think he's got all the skills to do so.
Yeah, Joe, from your kind of perspective, what do you make of kind of the headline picks, Downs and Lawrence for the Cowboys?
Yeah, obviously Downs is going to go straight in there. He's going to be, if Parker does what he's done with it previously, I think he's going to be a difference maker straight off there. You mentioned Quinyon Mitchell, where he was a bit like, he might just bet into the league. He was like, no, he was straight in there. I know it's like different positions, but he was straight in there. If they're good enough, they'll play. I think Lawrence might not start straight away, and I think that helps. I think where this Cowboys defense was good last year in terms of depth, and I think same as this year, is that probably the pass rush that on that line, just with the players that brought in. So it might help him to sit behind, last year's pick, Ezeraku, and not be relied upon, which a lot of first round edge rushers are. So I think that's going to help him massively as well. So I think certainly Downs is certainly going to be one for this year. You'll be seeing, a sneak preview to one of my bets. I think he's going to have a big year, but I think Lawrence could just be one of them where you just want to see, does he have that spark? Does he have that talent in order to be, especially where you picked him? I know he's a first rounder, but not all first rounders around that are going to be superstars on edges, but is he going to be a solid, good number 2, possibly number 1 edge rusher? I think that's just where you're trying to see from him this year. And, if he can get a few sacks, I think it would be a good first year for him.
Yeah, I think that's where they are. And that's probably my one, we'll get to my one worry still a little bit. So they do have depth in the pass rush now, but it just feels like they don't have that person that can just go win in the pass rush. And I think maybe that might come along in a veteran. I don't know, but we'll see. But that's just my one worry. They don't have that stud.
Plays in Green Bay.
He does, yeah, he does. But yeah, they don't just have that one, because that helps all the others, draws some more attention, things like that. Whereas you don't have to do that in a minute with the way it's set up. Right, let's go into, we've talked about most of them. Let's go into free agency. So we talked about Rashawn Gary, maybe a bit, Thompson, Winters. Anybody else that's coming, Baron, that you think could make a big difference?
I don't think so, really. I think we've nailed the big names here. I think one of the kind of ones to celebrate is Kenneth Murray leaving, one of the worst linebackers I've ever seen in a Cowboys jersey. So addition by subtraction, I think there. Get him miles away from the field, please. But yeah, I don't think there's anybody that we need to cover that we haven't mentioned.
I just think the one maybe just touch on, I think D Winters is big in terms of we just need somebody with a consistent level of performance in that and that linebacker core, because they've got Overshawn, who's great. Obviously, he's just got his injury issues. Like, they've just been cursed the last decade or so with kind of really good linebackers that can't stay healthy. Yeah, Sean Lee, Jalen Smith, Van Der Esch, and now Overshawn's the next one who just cannot stay healthy. So yeah, they kind of really, really need just some consistency and leadership at the linebacker position. And that's what I'm hoping D Winters will bring. Obviously, we shall see. And probably the other one to talk about, obviously, we talked about a little bit with the Niners last week, but Osa Odighizuwa traded out. How big a miss do you think Osa's going to be?
I think with the additions made, not as big as if we hadn't made them. I know it's pretty obvious, but I think they've kind of put them in a position where they maybe had a DT overload, really. So I don't think it's the end of the world, as much as I enjoyed watching him as a player.
Excellent. I'm sure Joe's very excited to see Osa Odighizuwa in the red and gold of the Niners. Right, let's go then just to the draft, because then we've talked Downs and Lawrence. The 7th round pick, Smith, the wide receiver, I think he's potentially very, very interesting. I can't remember who shared the video of Anthony Smith. I want to say it was maybe RJ. he just doesn't get tackled. When he gets the ball in hand, he just doesn't seem to ever be brought to the ground. So I'm interested to see his 7th round pick out of, I think, East Carolina. So I'm interested to see again. Could he be one again where they just scheme some things up if he does make the team around just getting him in space, and he just it's very, very difficult to bring down and just does seem to have good yards after the catch. But anybody else to kind of catching your eye from a draft perspective that we haven't touched on already?
Not especially, no. I mean, Overton and Barham we didn't touch on, but again, just filling out that pass rush defensive edge room, I think a positive because they're needed.
Yeah, big time for sure. Okay, then let's have a look at the key stuff, the totals. 9.5 wins for the Cowboys. Over is 11-10. Under is 5-7. Even money to make the playoffs. I think, not to spoil early on, but I think if you're looking at the Cowboys to make the playoffs, I think maybe you just take the over 9.5 wins just for the extra bit of value, maybe, given what it's probably going to take to get in, and to make the playoffs. 10-13. So just on the side of the bookies still don't fancy the Cowboys to make the postseason. Based on that, guys, where have you got the Cowboys in terms of win totals?
I have them at 10-7, so yeah, I'm taking the over.
Joe?
Yeah, I've got similar as well. 10, 9. Well, obviously 9-10 wins, it makes sense. But yeah, probably 10 wins. I just think that that defense is going to take a little step and they're going to get 10 wins and going to be on that bubble of a number of teams who can sneak into the playoffs. I think, the only issue with them making the playoffs is just how good probably the NFC is in terms of the depth in terms of the NFC West and North, and you're battling them, 4 teams plus the Cowboys is only 3 positions, so it's 10 wins going to be enough, or the tiebreakers there.
Yeah, you're going to be on the outside looking in potentially. I think I got I've got the Cowboys at 11-6. So I think this is a good shot. I think they've got a good opportunity to take the East back, which I suppose we'll talk about in a second with the division odds, because we're kind of where Philly are, which we'll get into it. But no, Philly went back-to-back last year. Nobody won the NFC East twice in a row for 20-odd years, and the odds of them winning it 3 years in a row are probably quite slim, just given how the NFC East has been, for a long period of time. So, I think, again, the Cowboys have got, an opportunity to kind of get going early as well. I think they've got a couple of friendly games. They go to Brazil to play Baltimore in week 3. And then, there's just some games on there where I just think they can pick up some wins. Tampa Bay, Arizona, Titans. I think the Colts. I think they just really need to just stack them wins up. And it is a tough run. Like, they do have kind of a real tough in the middle. Eagles, Seahawks, Rams as a 3-week run in the mid, like kind of in that mid-third of the season. So tough schedule, but I like Cowboys 11 wins, and I think that might be enough to pinch the NFC East this year. Let's have a look then at those odds. It is 11-5, just over 2-1 to win the division, 12-1 to win the conference, and 22-1 to be the Super Bowl 61 champion. Any value do you think here? Again, the division at just over 2-1, I think, seems a good shout when you think it's just kind of Cowboys, Eagles that are in it to win it.
Yeah, seems fair. Yeah, I think Eagles are rightly favourite, but just over 2-1, I think it's a great price. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to spoil my best later on, but yeah, I don't mind the 11-5. I think it's good. As like you said, it feels like he's a toss between them too. But yeah, I'll save the Philadelphia chat until we get into them.
Okay, so we get then. All right, is that where we're going next year?
Certainly is.
All right, let's head to the city of brotherly love. 11-6 for the Eagles, first in the NFC East, as you just mentioned. Lost to the 49ers in the wildcard round of the playoffs. 19th of scoring offense and 5th in scoring defense, according to Pro Football Reference. Yeah, guys, think of them. What did you guys make of the 2025 Philadelphia Eagles season?
Up and down. consistently worse than their record. I felt they were. You know, I remember they just kept winning games, and it was like, I don't know quite how they're doing this. Like the Rams game obviously comes to mind with a blocked kick, return for a touchdown. Yeah, it just felt like they kept getting away with it, and then kind of a fitting end to the season where they ultimately very much did not get away with it. The 49ers came up absolutely banged up. I think they were like 6-point underdogs, the Niners. Joe, you might remember the actual number, but it was around a touchdown, and I think we all took the Eagles because like the Niners just can't. This isn't a playoff team. Like, there's no way they can go into Philadelphia and win. And Kyle Shanahan does it again. See, I think ultimately disappointing. And the thing that I think really stood out, and we'll get to the change at OC, that Kevin Petullo offense was absolutely horrendous. We'll get to a few of the factors as we go through the slides here of who's gone and who's not gone. But yeah, it's one of the worst offenses in football to watch, considering who was on it. It's wild.
Yeah, it's so funny what the Eagles. It feels like every year they have a good year. Like they were 8-2, and it still felt like the building was burning down. It feels like no matter what they do, if they're having a stinker of a year in terms of record, or if they're doing well, it always feels like there's something amiss. And obviously there was, which we'll get into as well in terms of the dynamics between some of the superstars. But yeah, you mentioned the offense just wasn't slow, but that defense again. They may probably take a little step back in terms of where they were when they won the Super Bowl, but they still had superstars, and especially on that secondary, it was and another good year for that defense and having Vic Fangio there to run the show. But yeah, ultimately a disappointing and it felt like expected kind of loss, where they just how the season headed and just the overall feel, even though they went 11-6, won the NFC East, and playing at home in the wild card, it still felt like it was going to be a disappointment and something was going to blow up by the end, just with how everything went.
Yeah, it felt similar to the year after they lost to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl that year, and then they were like 10-1, and then the roof just completely caved in, and it was a disaster. They lost 6 of the last 7 and got beat by the Bucs in the wild card round of the playoffs. It was just a mess. Felt very, very similar to that. The defense did seem to have an upturn when Jalen Phillips came in. So they traded for Jalen Phillips from the Dolphins just before the trade deadline, and the defense did seem to kind of improve in line with Phillips coming in. So, and then they had that run. Kind of, you talked about them getting bye games. Like they beat Green Bay 10-7 on Monday Night Football, beat the Lions 16-9, I think, on a Sunday Night Football. And then lost that kind of when they were 21 points up against the Cowboys and didn't score in the second half and lost. Then that was the first of losing 3 in a row, and the wheels started to come off. Well, let's get into the headlines for the Eagles. Traded places. AJ Brown's saga is over. Star Brown traded to Pats as Eagles replaced Star with rookie Lemon and added Hollywood Brown to sauce the room up. Sorry. Are we saying Deontay yay or Deontay nay to be a true number 1 wide receiver? You've not made these easy for me. Right, yes. So let's just get into the wide receiver situation as a whole, I suppose. AJ Brown gone. It feels like obviously that him and Jalen Hurts just haven't been getting on for quite a while. Brown unhappy about kind of the lack of production as a result and his usage. And then it feels like it's all then completely gone due to kind of like a personal issue, not related to what's going on the field. You think it's just, the right thing, just kind of get gone, wash your hands of it, move on?
Yeah, I think ultimately, it wasn't going to work, was it? It felt like there was more at play than just the football of it. We've heard the salacious rumors, maybe we'll say, of off-the-field impropriety between quarterback, receiver, and a mutual acquaintance. I think it was best for everybody to move on. They got a first-round pick, so I think Howie will be happy with that. That can be put to use maybe for this season to go all in on somewhere if they need to, or just use it as future capital for either a player or a trade, So, I think that had come to an end. And again, it's a different offense again this year coming into it, so we'll see. But, Devonta Smith's going to have to be the big dog. In his first year, as a rookie, he had, 64 catches, 900 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's been a number 1 wide receiver before. He's a, for 100 targets, certainly. So I don't think he's the concern, Devonta Smith. But we'll see the pieces around him. Two relatively highly drafted rookies. How good can those ancillary pieces be, would be my question, more than is Devonta Smith a true wide receiver?
Joe, what are your kind of thoughts on kind of the moves that they've made, and is that a much better room now, do you think?
I don't know if it's a better room, just because I think AJ Brown's one of them players where weirdly it gets underappreciated how good of a wide receiver is obviously comes with some drama apparently, and it definitely felt like that room just was not happy. And we're going to talk about the OC and how the offense, it feels like now it's probably going to be centered around Hurts, which feels like it should be the right thing. You should center around your quarterback, but there's plenty of times where it was just like, why they're not throwing the ball to Brown or to Devonta Smith? And like Baron said, Devonta Smith has, most of his years is reaching 1,000 yards. So I think he can be a number one. Can he be a dominant number one like what AJ Brown was in some games? I'm not quite sure. And obviously they're hoping that Mekhi Lemon does step up, because, when you look at the rest of the room, I think it's going to be a lot, two tight ends as they normally do. But, they've got Wicks in, Hollywood Brown is being bounced around, Elijah Moore. It's not a crazy wide receiver room in terms of depth, but it just felt like it was the right time just to put an end to this. I am curious because it was a 2028 first round pick, which a lot of Eagles fans weren't happy with, because they feel like the 27 draft is, it feels like it's going to be the savior for all these franchises. So they managed to sneak that out. But, I think we say that every year when it comes to draft season, there's always some good players certainly to pick from. But I still feel like the good enough, it all depends on how Hurts works with this OC and what Lemon does to help Devonta Smith, so he's not just double teamed and people game plan him, and it's a very, we're just going to run quite a lot, and hopefully we get short yarded distance, and we'll just start with these tush push, because it feels like it's not been a subject this year, the tush push, and everything what revolves around that.
Well, I think even that started to fall apart a little bit during the second half of 2025. Like some teams were able to actually stop it, and we get maybe penalised a little bit more on it. And yeah, we shall see. Anyway, right, let's headline number 2. Hurts so different every year. Jalen gets another wingman as Sean Mannion takes over OC role. Will be the 5th year in a row where an OC has been hired. Love Hurts. Can Mannion bring Green Bay style to Philly? We've kind of talked, I suppose we've talked about this a lot with Jalen Hurts, and I think we talk about it with Baker quite a lot as well. They just don't really seem to have the consistency in the OC, and some of that is because of success has been with Philly, and similar with Baker in Tampa as well. And it means they've moved on to different jobs or head coaching jobs. How difficult is this for Jalen Hurts? And does it feel, is it fair, the criticism he's got? Does it feel like he's taking backward steps? Just a quick one, that ESPN's top 10 quarterbacks came out from where they got it from, like execs, and I think he's got an honourable mention like last. And this is a guy who has outplayed Patrick Mahomes in 2 Super Bowls, and like, is that fair?
It's really tough, because I think there's a lot of really good quarterbacks in the league, and I don't think necessarily being ranked 11th or 12th is like a damning indictment. But if it was based on Super Bowls only, yeah, you'd have a really good case to be in the top 5, but it isn't. And he was bad last year, ultimately. So, and it isn't easy having new OCs repeatedly. And I think this one's really interesting, because we don't really know anything about Sean Mannion. Obviously he was a player in the league, we know, but like as a coach, he was 2 years ago as an offensive assistant in Green Bay. Then he was quarterbacks coach last year, and now he's the OC of Philadelphia Eagles. It's a big step up in a real short amount of time. But, he has that experience in the league, but I've no idea what to expect of his offense. Maybe there's been pieces that will explain it to me that I haven't read yet, but I just don't really know what to expect. And I think it's a lot of pressure on Jalen Hurts this year, because, if it's another so-so year, when does Philly look to upgrade if needed? Obviously, Jalen has been great in the biggest of spots. But, you have to get back to the biggest of spots kind of every year in Philadelphia, is how it feels with how they structure their team. they're not playing for 11-6. They want 13 wins a season, 14 wins a season, and to make the Super Bowl. So a lot of pressure. I mean, that's why you get paid the big bucks, for big pressure. But I don't have any real expectations of how it'll go. So
yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious because obviously this is going to be the first time a Matt LaFleur kind of offense is going to go to Philly, and will that translate well, that kind of scheme? Because it feels like it's never, but they've never tried that kind of scheme, and it feels like Hurts has had a number of different ones. I think what's most frustrating about Hurts, you mentioned at the Super Bowls, he can throw it around and he can have great games, and I think that's what the most frustrating thing is, because you'll watch some games where it's just like he can't hit anything, and they've got the wide receivers, they've got the offensive line, they've got the running back, and sometimes it's like he's just not doing his job in terms of getting the ball out and getting it to his wide receivers, hitting them long balls. And I think that's just what the frustrating is about Jalen Hurts, because I think we've seen he can reach the heights, but he has all this like low games as well, where it's just like, come on, like you've got all the ability, you've got your legs, you've got everything, and so I'm curious how this, like the Matt LaFleur scheme, where he's had success with a lot of quarterbacks, can that translate then went to Philly and work for Jalen Hurts? And like I mentioned, with now Brown, that big personality. I know they've still got like big players in there, but it doesn't feel like they've got that, I don't want to say angry, I think that's the wrong word with AJ Brown, but someone who demands the ball and wants the ball all the time. It feels like they don't have that kind of, like, I think Saquon's going to get the ball no matter what. So now can they like fit it around what does Jalen Hurts do well? Can we improve on certain aspects? And then can we get all these players into the game? Because someone like Lemon, like we've mentioned in the draft period, is a lot of dink and dunk, and it's all about the yak, and then get Devontae streaking over when the defense is set up to stop Saquon. So I'm actually excited for this one. I think it could work in terms of the scheme and just the players and the overall setup in Philadelphia.
Cool, excellent. Right, headline number 3 for Philly. Philadelphia adds another layer of Woolen. Fresh from winning a Super Bowl ring, Woolen signs a $50 million contract to complete a secondary with Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Is this the best cornerback room in the league? Is it?
If it's not, it's got to be up there. I'd say it probably is, actually. So I'm just pulling up there. Sorry to have a good look at it. But yeah, Rick Woolen, Keely Ringo, who was good last year, Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. That's a really strong first four certainly names. So it's deep as well as being high level. So yeah, I don't have the rest of them all off the top of my head, but it's got to be up there. That's really, really strong. And all pretty young as well, which is, a good problem for Howard to have in a couple of years where he's got to pay them all, but not great for everyone else.
Yeah, I think obviously being a big fan, Joey feels like that's his staple of his defenses. Obviously, time in Broncos, which could argue, and like you probably say Texans as well, who've got an argument with the best secondary, and the Seahawks where Woolen has come from. But I just think just the setup. I'm curious him signing a 1-year deal. He's just thinking, I may have not had the greatest year in Seattle last year. I think he had a good year, but not like incredible. You come in here, you might be you play the second cornerback. I'll have a great year. I'll go in the free agency market next year and sign probably a 5-year deal with the Raiders, who probably spend an absolute fortune on him. That kind of. But I just think he just, like you mentioned, the depth. We'll get, the front may have lost a few people. They've brought a few in, which we'll talk about in the next headline. But just having that secondary, I think that's what they build themselves on. Just how good Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean has come into this league, where we thought, oh, that's a great pickup. How he does it again, but it doesn't always relate to the field. But it so has, especially Quinion Mitchell, where he's just gone, arguably, top 5 cornerback in the league. So adding another piece in there just to round it out, just increases the floor. I just think they're just the staple pieces they've got throughout this squad. Yeah, and added in these players, it's more just like sprinkle just to make this team better and better, just because they managed to keep all the pieces. And they've done it before, where they've signed players like Zach Baum, where he got released from his old team. People like, is he good enough? Is he actually like going to be a superstar kind of player's position? And look how he's turned out. So I'm curious if they can do the same for Woolen as well.
Excellent. Right, let's have a look at then headline 4. Painting the pass rush green, Jonathan Grenard trade gives depth after Phillips leaves in free agency. Do they deserve their title as a heavyweight, and can they go the distance in 2026? Yeah, I mean, do we still think they've got enough kind of around that kind of defensive front and front seven?
I think probably just about, yeah. Jalen Hunt came on last year as well, obviously. You know what you're getting from Zach Bourne at this point in his career. You had Campbell, work in progress there. I thought Mario Jomo was pretty good last year as well. Kind of a bit of a breakout star. And then obviously you've got Davis and Jalen Carter on the line as well, who are no slugs. So, but what I think is a little concerning is like the sack numbers were not gaudy for anybody last year. Their sack leader, in fact, was Jalen Hunt with 6.5. You had Ojomo at 6, John Davis 4.5, Nicole Bedine at 4. Like nobody really shone out. So I think Grenard might elevate that one player over Jalen Phillips, who he was only there half a season as well. But it might give him that one piece who can, get a double team and still compete and free up space for these other pass rushers. I think it's an improvement on where they were. So, yeah, I think they should be well set.
Yeah, I would say there's big pressure on him, though, because, we mentioned Phillips, and I know Paul mentioned it earlier, but there was a lot of question marks about that front before they brought Phillips in, where we expected it to be big time. Especially, obviously, we've talked about Carter and Davis, and it didn't feel like it clicked until Phillips came, and then suddenly he may have not got the sacks, but he certainly got the pressures. And I think, Grenard last year, when we talked about the Vikings, he only got 3 sacks compared to the 2 years before where he got 12.5 and 12. But his pressure rate was, I think he was in the top 5 pressure rate. And that's coming from, a Vikings team which was very scheme heavy in terms of getting their sacks. I'm curious how he's going to work when you've got a Davis and you've got a Carter to take a lot of bodies up. Can he then, improve his numbers again and get up to that 12 mark, 12 to 15 mark, which I think he possibly can do in this team. But if he gets his pressure rates up, there's probably someone else going to take over. But I think there is a lot of pressure on him just because I think he's understood how good Phillips was, and obviously he got his money in Carolina just because coming from Miami off that injury, there wasn't when they signed him, it was like, okay, it's a good piece, we'll see what it does, but he improved them massively, and I think they need that again in order to compete with the heavyweights in the NFC. So I think there is I think Grenard needs to hit the ground running and have a good season for this Eagles team to compete with the likes of the Seahawks and the Rams.
I think really Nolan, who I think's been a disappointment up until this point in his career, he got to 10.5 sacks last year over his 3 seasons, and I think he came in pretty highly touted. He was first round pick, and he just doesn't seem to have ever really got going in Philly. So I think this is a really big break, make or break year for him in Philadelphia.
Excellent. Yeah, taking on the end of the first round in 23, wasn't he? And just one of those raft of Georgia defensive players that have come in, but he's not quite hit the heights that some of the others have. Right, let's go into the rest of the free agency. Well, again, we've talked about a lot of them. The one I probably want to talk about is a little bit is a more recent pickup. Again, I feel like I've just done a good job with just some real depth pieces. AJ Epinenza came in from Buffalo, and he definitely had a down year for him last year. He 6+ sacks the 3 seasons before. I think he had 2.5 or 3 for the Bills. He was pretty disappointing, apart kind of that Bills problem that they just couldn't really get a pass rush going when it mattered. But I feel like he could be a really good contributor as a depth and rotational piece for them. Anybody else that's kind of screaming out as an impact player for the Eagles that we haven't touched upon?
I don't think so. I think again we've covered the big names that we expect to make an impact. I am a little intrigued by Dontavian Wicks. If he can, he's never going to be AJ Brown. Let's get that very clear. But I think he'll take that role as much as it exists in this offense. And if you can ever learn to catch, yeah, I know it's a biggie. I think there is a player there though. He's had big games in his career, and they give him plenty of money. I think he's getting $12 million a year, which is obscene when you look at what running backs get paid. But it is different markets. I think I have a little optimism for Dontavian Wicks. He does come in as the only player who has prior experience with Sean Mannion as well. So, he knows the scheme, and also Sean knows him. So I have a sneaky little upside in my mind on Dontavian Wicks.
Awesome. Right, let's get to the rest of the draft then. Let's get to the draft for the Eagles. Yeah, Kyle Lemon, we've talked about some of these. I'm really excited for Stowers. Whether, he's listed as a tight end. Is he going to be a wide receiver or not? I don't know, just with his size. But yeah, Stowers I'm really intrigued in. Again, yeah, the fifth round quarterback. Some would say that the Eagles already have a quarterback that can just run and can't throw. Well, they've got another one in Cole Payton from North Dakota State. Obviously, had success with that in Carson Wentz, coming from the sort of same place. Cole Payton's an interesting, gimmicky one. I wonder if there is a role for him in kind of this Eagles, a Taysom Hill-like role for him in this Eagles offense. Any thoughts? Do you think I think they might kind of get him a few plays a game.
But he's got to compete against Andy Dalton first and Tanner McKee.
There we go, Tanner McKee.
Yeah, they traded for Andy Dalton. So because he's listed fourth, so yeah, you never know with this Eagles team. We never expected the tush push until that became a huge thing. So they might try and do that. I'll be surprised if they do that straight away. I think if the offense is not working, they might try and do that kind of stuff. But when you got Saquon and the wide receivers they've got, and like you mentioned, the Stowers, I think they're going to play a lot of two tight ends and play heavy ball to get Saquon going. Yeah, I'm not quite sure, but it's a nice little pick, fifth rounder. There's plenty of fifth rounders who don't make it the first year, so why not? I think what I'm interested in is some of the other picks. When you look at actually depth, because I think what we always think about this Philadelphia team is that offensive line and just how great and stout it is. But when you look at the depth now, just with some of the players retiring, a lot of players getting older as well. Markel Bell, who they got in the third round, he's currently sitting behind Mailata, and Lane Johnson's had his injuries as well. Are they going to have to rely on him during the year? So I think he could have some big ones as well. And I think which was big for fantasy wise, they didn't draft or really get in a running back, so I think Saquon's going to be up there with drafting high again when Tank Bigsby and Will Shipley running backs behind that. They didn't go for a youngster who could help Saquon take some of the carries. I think it's just going to be all him this year again. So.
Well, right, let's move on to win totals. 10.5 wins is the over-under for the Eagles. Over 23-20, under 20-29. So that seems to suggest that the books, the odds makers have got them at 10, bang on 10 wins. Where have you guys got the Eagles?
Sorry, I'm just pulling my screen. It's taking a second to load. I have them at 12-5. So I would probably take the over, but I'd rather take Dallas's over 9.5. If that makes sense. I just think that offensive question mark. I do have them at 12 wins, so obviously I think they're going to win 12 games, but I just think there's a bit more ask there on the offense than there is on Dallas's defense to improve. So yeah, 12-5 for me.
I've actually at 13 wins, so this is going to come into one of my 14 wins is in my
just found another one.
My bets for the team. So yeah, 14 wins, 14-3. I'm obviously relying on the foundation of the team that's not really changed, and that's going to continue. They feel like they have an up year, down year, up year. Even though last year they still got to the wild card, it still felt like a bit of a down year. I think they're going to have a big up year. I think that offense is going to click, and that defense is going to keep rolling. So I've got them at 14 wins. So clearly the over there.
I've got them at 10. So I was initially thought quite high on the Eagles, but I've not been necessarily massively impressed. Kind of what they've been doing. They've got kind of a couple of really, really sort of tough stretches of games. There's again a lot. They kind of have an extreme schedule. Whereas obviously there's the gimmies on. Obviously they've got AFC South as the NFC East does with the Titans on it. Obviously the Titans and the Colts, who again think necessarily great. The Jags, who might take a step back. Obviously Houston's tough, but they've got rough games at San Francisco. They host Seattle. Thanksgiving at the Cowboys. They play the Steelers. Who knows what you're going to get from them? But so they've got the Rams at Chicago. They go to London to play the Jaguars as well. Yeah, I've got them at 10. So kind of one behind the Cowboys. I think they're going to be pretty close. So yeah, I don't know if I'd take the under though. Make the playoffs, obviously heavily odds on to make the playoffs. 5, 9, 10 should do it, I guess. But I don't know what they're saying. 7-5 to not make the playoffs. Let's have a look at their kind of championship credentials. They are the favourites to win the NFC East and win it 3 years in a row at 5-4, 9-1 to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl, and 18-1 to win the Super Bowl. They're kind of in that kind of area with the Texans, with the Niners, I think we said, didn't we? Of kind of that odds to win the Super Bowl. Do you think that's right? They're in kind of like a bit of a third tier.
I think that's a little harsh, truthfully, because what we've seen in the past from them once they get to the playoffs. I know last year, but like we've seen them make a Super Bowl really recently. We've seen them win a Super Bowl really recently. I think it's a little harsh to be 18-1. I'd be really interested in that price, truthfully. I think, they've got a better chance than, say, the Cowboys, who are like 22-1, pretty close number. But I think if I had to pick one to go deep, I'd pick the Eagles. So I like the Eagles. Sorry.
Yeah, I like the 18-1 as well. That's probably the one I like the most. I just think they've got the DNA of winning the Super Bowl. I think they've still got all them players in. Like, you mentioned the other teams like the 49ers and the Texans, and I'd probably take Eagles over both of them teams just with the players they've got in terms of knowing how to win, and they've still got the staff. And I think that division is, you've got the Cowboys be slightly easier as well compared to the North and West. So I actually like the Eagles at 18-1. It feels like that's the kind of range you want, where it's a team where you can see them winning the Super Bowl, and it's a good price around that 18-22 mark where you're actually going to win some money as well. So, and it feels like they get the Super Bowl, they don't. They get the Super Bowl, don't. And will this that continue in this trajectory?
Excellent. Right, last but not least, then the Washington Commanders. Let's head to the nation's capital. 5-12 for the Commanders after getting to the NFC Championship game in 24. That was good. Third in the NFC, missed the playoffs, and 22nd scoring offense, 27th scoring defense. It just felt a bit of a mess. Injuries a big problem. So Jaden Daniels missed a lot of time, and it just kind of felt they had that veteran team that got them there in 2024, and it felt like they all got way older, way quicker than they were expecting to. And 2025 was a real struggle.
Yeah.
Discuss.
So it was obviously a disappointment from where they went to. I think everyone was excited just how they ended that year. But like you said, it felt like that just was the perfect year. And it felt obvious now looking back that the bubble was going to burst, like you mentioned. It felt they were very top heavy, that they had a lot of like good players, but they had no depth whatsoever. And it felt like they were the kind of team with like had such a low floor and a high ceiling. And obviously when Jaden Daniels gets injured and he kept coming back a few games way too early, getting re-injured, just the overall team just didn't seem right. You look at the defense, 27th, where, that's not going to do it. And you look at the wins they had, it was against the Giants, the Raiders, good win against the Chargers, then Giants again. And then they beat the Eagles in a nothing ball in the Week 18. So I think it was just disappointing. I was surprised that certain people kept their jobs, and in terms of coming into this year, just about disappointing that year was. I think obviously it's a big year now. Just how bad last year was for head coach. I think obviously quarterback's going to remain, but it's so weird how after the first year we were like, well, Jaden Daniels clearly was the best quarterback in that class, and now we're like, oh. If we did that draft again, because I think he went first when we redrafted it last year. If we did that again, I think he'd probably be third out of the three now. So it's certainly an interesting one this year, and I think definitely a big year. Just how disappointing last year was.
I think what's really one of the things that I like to look at is like the conversion rate, third and fourth down. In their 2024 Jaden Daniels rookie season, they were 6th on third down conversions and 1st on fourth down conversions. Last year, they were 21st and 9th. So like a pretty significant fall off, especially on my third down one there. And it just felt like 2024, everything that could go right, it did go right. And last year, I'm not going to say everything that could go wrong did go wrong, but like it felt much more like a crash down to earth. I think, you touched on the Jaden Daniels in and out with Marcus Mariota every other week, it felt like. I think a clear out was a good thing. And I think if they didn't do it, I think Dan Quinn might have been clearing out his own lockers. So, always going to be the way.
Excellent. Right, let's get into the headlines for the Commanders. Coordinator changes. David Blau becomes the offensive coordinator while Durante Jones becomes new DC. Was the team correct in pushing Kingsbury off the cliff? We always talk about the Cliff Kingsbury drop, I guess, of the cliff, of where kind of you get some great initial success and then it tails off. We saw it in Arizona. We've seen it with Jaden Daniels, I guess. So we saw it, it happened again. And what do you think the move to David Blau, who's a Hard Knocks favorite, trying to make teams a lot during the training camp? What do we make of kind of that move to Blau then as OC?
I think it's another interesting one, like Sean Mannion. Blau's only 30 years old. It just feels so young. He's been in Washington a couple of years now as I think an offensive assistant, then the quarterbacks coach. Now OC, obviously. He was in Detroit, I believe, with Ben Johnson. So, he's a defensive mind we certainly trust a lot. But I don't know quite what his tree is. Is he a Kingsbury guy? Is he a Ben Johnson guy? I'm not too sure. Again, a lot of pressure on a young mind here to come in and, it's been up and down with Jaden Daniels. I think he's incredibly talented, Jaden. I mean, that's no bold call, geez Louise. We've seen him in that rookie year. He's obviously incredibly talented. But I have a lot of faith in Jaden Daniels to have another bounce back year, certainly. It's a lot to ask of David Blau. 30 years old, your first play calling job, your first big job. And, we've talked about situations like with Dave Canales and Dan Campbell of, if the OC doesn't work out, well, they'll just take play calling over. Dan Quinn ain't taking over offensive play call. I certainly hope he's not, because that sounds like a recipe for disaster. Maybe you could tell Kyle Shanahan how to run the ball when it matters. But other than that, a big gamble. But, go big or go home, I guess. It's maybe Dan Quinn's approach, because if it's another bad year, Dan Quinn ain't getting another one.
Yeah, I think it's obviously a big gamble because it is that year where if they do terribly, then Quinn's gone. But then it's also it's that on the upside. I hate when people just sign, and we've talked about teams just signing just OCs, which have Nathaniel Hackett, for example, keeps getting OC jobs wherever he goes, and it never works out. It just feels like that kind of. I'm glad they didn't do that, but it doesn't also get me excited as well to be like, oh, this incredible mind is suddenly going to be helping Jaden Daniels along, because I think that team needs that in terms of, I think Jaden Daniels great, but I feel like he needs a good scheme with it as well, just because of the other players they've got, that you can't just rely on Jaden Daniels. We've seen this league where, a QB can do so much and it can be incredible, but teams work them out. So you need to have things then figure out, what do I change now in order to, tip the scales onto my side now? And you need a coordinator to do that, and it feels like he is a Kingsbury. He was under Kingsbury with the Cardinals for a year as well. Obviously, brought him in. So, does that give you the most excitement? It's probably going to be a similar kind of offense, which we saw last year. Clearly, wasn't working, and it's a gamble. And I know I was just reading about his coaching tree, and it was like the New York Jets. Aaron Glenn tried to request an interview, but I don't know if that gives you much hope as well that the New York Jets are trying to get you. It's not don't know how big of a positive that is. So, it's certainly a gamble. We'll see if it pays out. But if it doesn't, then I think everyone's gone in our organisation.
Right, well, let's go to headline number 2 then. For the Commanders. Commanders restyle defense. Old guards leave town. Bobby Wagner headlines the leavers. Sonny Styles, the new commander on D. Have they done enough to pass the floor raising bill? Jesus Christ.
That's good, Joe.
Well done, Joe. So a lot of old heads gone. Sonny Styles was, again, one of my favorites in the draft. He's going to have a real good NFL career and do that role, I think, that Bobby Wagner has done in the NFL for teams for such a long period of time. How do we think this defense is going to go then in 2026?
I think it has to be an improvement, right? Bobby Wagner, God bless him, with his 9,000 tackles last year. I think just being stood in the middle of the field, really. I can't believe how highly rated he still is. I think he still made the NFL top 100, which feels crazy. I mean, good for him, he's racking up the tackles. But anyway, I like what they've done. by and large, I much prefer this to the thing of 2024 when they brought in kind of everybody who was 2 years away from retirement. Adebayomi, I like as an addition. I don't think he's an elite pass rusher, but I think he's a good one. In LA and then in Baltimore for a spell. Leo Chenal from Kansas City, obviously an improvement. Nick Cross from Indy at safety. Amik Robertson, DB from Detroit. Akil Weatherspoon as well, DB coming in. It's just a lot of players who know what they're doing. So I think in terms of raising the floor, I think absolutely they've crushed it there. Is there a ceiling? Hard to argue that really, unless Sonny Styles is, a Hall of Fame level talent week one, which is unfair to expect. I think he's going to be a really good linebacker in time. He's another one like Caleb Downs. I think could be top 5 at his position by year 2 even. But, it's an awful lot to ask for a year 1 player to come in and be a captain of a defense and know his own role and everybody else's and do it all really well instantly. But I think in terms of floor raising, they've absolutely nailed it, really. You consider what you can get in free agency. Mm-hmm. I think they've done a really good job filling up the rooms.
Yeah, I still worry for them, though, in terms of just their overall talent. I get what you're saying, like, they've brought in some great players. Like Adebayomi is one of them where it's like, we see all the time he has one good year on a really good team, with other players, and then the team pays him like he should be like a star defensive edge, and then it doesn't work out, and then he's looking for another team another year. So that's what I worry about. You've still got Javid Kinlaw as your, on your starting line as your defensive tackle or defensive edge as well. And they've got a lot of players who are like the 3rd best player on other teams to be in their starting lineup. I think if they had certain stars, if you think about a couple of years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, the Commanders, especially their line, they had just like talent across the board from like edge and tackle. It feels like they've lost all of that. And these players they're bringing in would be great to like sit behind them for depth, but they're going to have to just go in there and be starters straight away. So that's my only worry. And we'll talk about some of the other positions in some of the slides, but I think they've done as good as what they can do, but I still don't think it's enough. I think they've had too many bad drafts the last few years and too many bad free agencies where it's catching up with them now when you've got your star quarterback still on his rookie deal. I feel like it's a very Commanders thing that they've just wasted it. Like they had that one good year bringing the veterans, but that just felt like the 1 year bubble, and they've just had bad drafts other than obviously Jaden Daniels, which felt like they couldn't miss on that one, to continue against the playoffs, which they were hoping for.
Yeah, cool. All right, headline number 3 then for the Commanders. Pigs get fat, hogs get paid. Tunsil headlines agree with $30 million a year extension. However, with the surprise cut of Tyler Badash, can the unit continue to improve to help Jaden? So it feels like with that move, I think Nick Allegretti is in to play center. Did seem a bit of an odd one because Tyler Badash has gone to, is it the Chargers that picked him up? I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And they were after Linderbaum as well. Commanders were one of the big people after him. So it's Cowboys fans, like, obviously, he used to play for the Cowboys and he was the starter the last 2 years. Do you think it's a big miss?
I think he was always pretty solid. Like, he wasn't spectacular, but I think he was just solid. I think unless you've got somebody better, what are you doing?
Yeah, I was surprised they cut him. It didn't quite make sense to me. It still doesn't really.
Yeah, and I put out the improvement as well because I think the 2 years beforehand they're like giving up 50-odd sacks, and I think last year they were like 16th, 17th best defensive line, so still not amazing, but averages. A lot of this league will love an average offensive line, and they've kept all the players. And I think Tunsil, I can't believe he's only 32. I always feel like he should be much older just for how many contracts, and he's managed to get paid. But I think he had a decent year, good year. They got Sam Cosme. Obviously they've got Connolly on right tackle, who I think he had an okay year, but he gave a few sacks, and he needs to improve as well. And then the left guard is a mixture of players. So I think they've got a decent offensive line, but I was just surprised with that center that you've just given that away, especially how much you need to keep Jaden upright and fit for this team to be anything good this year. Because I think if he has a similar injury-ridden season, then it's another high pick in the draft next year.
I was, with Larry Tunsil, I think he's just like his earnings will pass over $120 million this season. for that contract, and I've still been more for some years after it. Just never thought he'd get to that point after the gas mask bong on draft night when it came out. It just always still surprises me that teams still continue to pay money, but obviously his play certainly for a period warranted it, I guess. Warranted it.
Yeah, including last year, to be fair. I think he's still a really good tackle.
Cool, right. Headline number 4. Are you kidding me? Brandon still in play. Media hysterics. Are you still expected to join? Do they need the drama? Wide receiver room depth may mean yes. When has a crazy guy in Washington, D.C. not worked out? So I had the delay because I was like, oh, that's the 49ers overlay, because that's kind of similar to what we did for the 49ers last week. But yeah, again, we talked about it a little bit with Tony, kind of where Brandon Ayuk is at. This feels like he's just burning the bridges everywhere. This feels like just a terrible idea for the Commanders to go get Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, I mean, it's all well and good giving Antonio Brown tolerance if you have Antonio Brown level play. Brandon Ayuk doesn't. And he hasn't, in any point in his career, he hasn't been Antonio Brown, and he hasn't played football for 18 months. So I've been getting off for 2 years, really. So I would just steer clear, truthfully. Give Stephon Diggs a call, who, I mean, isn't the guy with no controversy, but he's not on social media calling everyone a bum and threatening to sue. I would steer clear of Brandon Ayuk.
Stephon Diggs made the interesting claim today. I was today or yesterday that he is the best. So he's fully accepted he's not wide receiver 1 anymore, but he's the best wide receiver 2 in the NFL.
Yeah, I remember
it seems bizarre when there's T. Higgins and George Pickens and Devontae Adams and Jordan Addison and
Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, Joe, you're obviously close to it from the other side of it, from an Niners perspective. What do you expect the resolution to be?
I have no idea, to be honest. I'm just happy. The 49ers are just keeping him as long as possible to help out their dead cap, just because obviously it was a disastrous contract. I was happy when they gave it to him because he obviously had a good year beforehand, but it's just been his disaster since with the injury and then everything off the field. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. I think there was a few teams that I think Steelers offered him a decent trade pick, and there's rumors going there, and a few other teams. It would be nice to have got like even a 2nd round pick, even a 3rd round pick, anything for him now. But I think they're going to release him at some point. And I think I only mentioned this just because when you look at the Commanders depth chart, in terms of, they've got Scary Terry, but he keeps getting injured, and then they've got Luke McCaffrey didn't have a great year, Antonio Williams, Traylon Burke, De'Ami Brown. It doesn't give you much hope. And Jacoby Krosky-Merritt, running back with Rashad White. Are you going to be able to rely on the run game as well? That was my only issue with that. They might have to just get him if there's no one else there. If he's willing to, he has that relationship with Jaden Daniels. I'm curious how that holds up with just some weird stuff happening there as well. So, yeah, we'll see. He's not going to get a big contract. He's certainly worked himself out of that anyway.
Right, let's go to the free agency moves. We touched a little bit from a Commander's perspective. Joe, you mentioned the chat around before we were prepping for this that you were disappointed you couldn't find any Okonkwo lines for kind of some season bets. Are you excited for him, for the Commanders?
I am, just because I've mentioned about the depth chart for the Commanders. I think he's going to be fairly relevant. Zach Ertz, how many times the last few years has he managed to rack up numbers and receptions for the Commanders. So I actually like that chick, especially in fantasy as well. I think he's going to get so many targets. I think last year he had 56 targets. Well, the last 3 years, 54, 52, 56. Receptions, that's not targets, and getting around 500 yards. I think he's going to get more yards this year. I think he's going to be pushed the 700-800 mark, maybe 3 or 4 touchdowns, because teams are going to just mark Terry McLaurin because they've really got nothing else. So I think he could have a huge year. So I'm waiting to see what that market is. Unfortunately, there's nothing out right now. But I think I'm going to go heavily on Chig. What do you think fantasy-wise, Byron, as a tight end, maybe a good tight end to certainly sit in your squad with the target?
Yeah, totally agree. I've always kind of loved Chiggy. He's had little flashes in Tennessee, never quite sustained it. I thought he was really good as a rookie, though. So if you hit as a rookie tight end, I think you're normally pretty well set. And I totally agree with everything you just said. I think he should be their number 2 target getter. And yeah, certainly as a late round tight end, I think it's a great value. Yeah.
Getting cheeky with it. Right, let's go then to the draft. I mean, we've been pretty critical, as you mentioned, or certainly Joe's summary there, that the drafts have been bad. How do we think we're going to look at this one in a couple of years down the line then? Joe, is there any, again, I think Sonny Styles in particular is going to be incredible, but anything else to kind of supplement in that?
Well, I've just mentioned that Antonio Williams might have to start straight away. That's how bad this team is in terms of the wide receivers. He obviously don't, third round is getting chucked in straight away. It's just a crazy team where it's like, how have you only got 6 draft picks with how bad you've been for so long?
Your third draft pick is 147.
Yeah.
Well, they used to get players like Lattimore and things like that. Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's just bad management constantly. So they're wasting the draft picks on the picks they've made the last few years, and they're just throwing them away as well on players who hang around for half a year and don't produce whatsoever. So, it says a lot when your second pick, your third rounder, like I said, is going to have to start. And, it's not like Luke McCaffrey really pulled up trees last year. I think he was fairly disappointing in Washington. So, we'll see where that goes. But there's nothing else which I'm like, and you're drafting a quarterback in the 7th round to sit behind Max Mariota. It is what it is. And I expected big things from the GM from the Commanders coming from 49ers. It seemed like he was very popular there. But, it's a bit of a stink show the last few years.
I hope that quarterback has to play at times, just so we have to kind of have a stab at his name during the reviews and previews and things like that during the season. Kaliakmanis.
I do just want to give my man Kaliakmanis a shout out though. Afan, he is from the next town over to me in Illinois. It's the closest I've come to watching a high school football game, driving past it when it's when the game's been on. Never actually went to the stadium and sat in a game. But it's a town of 14,000 people, I think, 12, 14,000 people. Really small, little nice place, Antioch, Illinois. And he just got drafted into the NFL, so that's pretty badass. So he'll probably never play, but it's a cool little local story here at least.
Well, second, awesome. I didn't realize it was from near Carlisle, but okay.
They call him Carlisle Manis.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, Byron. That's your task. You have to try and get us an interview with Kaliakmanis.
Senior.
Yeah.
Him himself. Sorry. I was
big time. Yeah. But, no.
I'll see what I can do, yeah.
Big time. Excellent. Right. Next up then. Lines 7.5 wins for the Commanders. Win total over under 7.5. 10 to 13 for over. Under even money. So that seems to suggest 8 wins for the Commanders is kind of where Vegas see them. Yeah. What have you guys got?
I've got them at 4. I've got them at 4. I think I have a stink of a year. I've got 4. Yeah. 4 and 13. So way under.
Byron?
6 and 11 for me. So I thought I was being a bit of a harsh judge, but I love that from Joe.
That's love that. Yeah, I'm same. I've got 6 and 11 as well. Yeah, I think it's probably fine. Maybe just some wins at the end. Might have to pick up a couple of wins at the end to make that record look a little bit better. But yeah, I'm not expecting good things from them. To start, they play. They've got at Philadelphia, at Dallas, and then Seattle to start the season. So I'm fully expecting them to be kind of 0-3. And it doesn't just get London. Off to London to play the Colts. Then the Giants, Niners, Eagles, Rams is the next kind of 3-game stretch after that.
I'm trying to think where I got 6 wins from.
Yeah. Bengal, but they've got obviously they play the Giants and maybe 1, Cardinals, Titans, Falcons.
But all them teams would be like, well, we've got the Commanders, we'll win. So
yeah, I mean, Cardinals and Titans are away road games as well for the Commanders. So, like you say, they'll be looking at there's a win for us.
Yeah, it could be a rough year for the Commanders. A lot of why have they got they've got so many primetime games as well, which just seems insane. Anyway, right. Let's have a look at the odds for division, conference, Super Bowl. 9-2 to win the division, 28-1 to win the conference, 55-1 to win the Super Bowl. It just feels so short. It really does, kind of, with everything we've just kind of discussed and talked about. Yeah, is there a outside shot they win the division?
I'll see it. I don't want to be so blunt, but yeah.
Yeah, they are third favourites to win the NFC East. So the Giants are outsiders, as we've mentioned earlier. But yeah, just feels tough. Nothing there that's of great value. Right. Best bets time. Joe, you're first. Bucking the trend of what we normally do, but that's fine. Keep me on my toes. I like it as host. Let's start with your nice Cowboys bet first before we talk about your disgusting Eagles bet.
Yeah, I thought, do one to make you guys happy, the other one to make you sad. So I've got Caleb down 3+ interceptions at 2-1. Again, there's not many markets for interceptions right now. It's just showing a lot of the rookies, and the 2+ was below even. So I thought, why not just add an extra one on there? I think when you look at how the Vic Fangio kind of defense looked with Philadelphia, and then obviously bringing it across to the Cowboys, that kind of scheme, I think he's going to get opportunities. I think it's going to be an improvement especially at the front. So I think he could be one of them superstars straight away, like the Brian Branch, the Ravens guy, which his name has just slipped my mind. Hamilton, yeah, that kind of player where it just comes into the league and you can just see it straight away. So 3+ interceptions at 2-1. And then my other one to make you guys sad, as I've mentioned, I had the Eagles with 14 wins. For them, I'm the best regular season record at 14s. I think the AFC is going to be around 11, 12-ish. And I think it's either going to be in between like Eagles, Seahawks, or Rams. Whichever team can get to 13, 14 is going to have the best record of the year. So 15-1, I did like. It was a nice price. I think I mentioned during some of the others. Like I see the top 3 teams: Eagles, Rams, Seahawks. You're just betting on which one is going to get the best record. So a 15-1, I do like that price.
So just one on you, Caleb. Yeah. Just one on you, Caleb Downs. Obviously, they only played 12 games, but never had more than 2 interceptions in a season in college. But
he'll get targeted more in the NFL.
And he's playing 5 extra games, you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. He's playing 5 extra games. Absolutely. I just thought I'd share the info, Joe. That's all. Right. Next up, me. I've gone for a treble, which is not normally what we do these things, but I've gone for Saquon, Javonte Williams, and Cam Scatterbo all to have 1,000+ rushing yards at 8-1. It was actually what initially got me going was I was looking at their touchdown over-unders, and I had a little Scatterbo Jackson Dart over rushing touchdowns to begin with. But then when I kind of fact rushing yards, I think injury is going to be the issue here, isn't it? I think obviously Cam Scatterbo's coming off the back of one. Javonte Williams obviously had a huge bounce back year, I guess, for him. He rushed for over 1,200 yards. And even in a down year, Saquon was comfortably kind of over 1,000 yards. I'm expecting the Eagles to run the ball better than they did last year. So, yeah, I'm betting on health, I guess, really. I need I need 15 games out of Cam Scatterbo. But 8-1 as a treble for all 3 to go over 1,000 rushing yards, I thought was really, really good value. And then Cowboys over 9.5 wins. You mentioned it earlier. I think the Cowboys are going to get in the playoffs. To do that, you're going to need 10 wins. The over 9.5, which is better value at 11-10 versus the even money to get in the playoffs. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. I think after 2 losing seasons in a row, I think odds are the Cowboys will have a winning season. It just needs to be 2 games to the good rather than 1, I guess, to make that happen now. But yeah, I think Cowboys over 9.5. I think they will be good, not great. And I think that might be enough to get you 10 wins with that schedule.
Absolutely. Byron. Yeah, first player bet, Terry McLaurin, 1,000+ receiving yards. In what will be his 8th year in the league. He's hit 1,000 5 times previously. His rookie year, he didn't play enough games. He played 14 games. If he played 17, he would have had 1,100 based on per game averages. Last year, he came up a little short as well. Only played 10 games, and his per game would have been 989. David Blau, very encouragingly, has talked about he wants to get McLaurin at least 10 targets a game. plans to use him all over the field to exploit favourable matchups, which is exactly what Cliff Clifford didn't do, and just kind of sat him on the outside left and just said, deal with it, we'll get on with it, which I don't think is the way to use your best players. So I think very confident in Terry McLaurin getting 1,000 receiving yards if he plays a full season, which is even money. And then Dallas and Philadelphia, top two, any order, 17-10. Talked about the Commanders. I'm at 6 wins. Giants, we've talked about, I don't have very high. It would have to go really badly for Dallas or Philly to not crack the top two, I think, in this division. So 17-10, not quite 2-1, but, odds against, I'll certainly take that all day for those two.
Excellent. Right. That is our NFC East preview in the books. That's the NFC done. Thanks again to our guest, Craig from the Irish NFL show, for joining us to preview all things New York Giants. We'll move to the AFC next. Not sure what division we're going to do first. We still need to organise that, but it'll be the NFC. And we've got 4 to go. If you've missed the other division previews, go check them out. We've got some more interviews, more Union Jack Classic preview content coming up as well. Go check the socials for all the clips. We attended the Big 12 Media Days last week. That was really cool. Go check out all the videos with both coaches, the Arizona State athletic directors, the players from Arizona State and Kansas. It was awesome. So go check that out. And you'll find all that at GTW_GTC, available on Instagram, X, Twitter, Blue Sky, and the podcast available on YouTube video version, and also Spotify and Apple Podcasts, Podbean as well. So wherever you get your podcast, you'll be able to listen to it as well. And thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.